for taking time out from your busy schedule to attend this meeting, which is going to be very interesting, as the topic itself is quite interesting, which is tradition in the making, lived Islam among some Roma communities in the Balkans. As you are all aware, Center for Roma Studies and Cultural Relations has been active for more than 3 years in developing and strengthening our reach with the Roma brothers and sisters all across the world. And we had been holding physical conferences prior to the pandemic. The last one was held in 2018. But after pandemic, we have been following this practice of webinars and our newsletters to understand Roma's issues across the world. And this lecture series, which is held every month, is aimed to understand issues and challenges faced by Romas in different countries and on certain issues. I may also add that our center has also been organizing events to mark the important days of Roma calendar. And we are very happy that for our lectures as well as for our other conferences, we had been having good participation and very important presenters from the Roma communities and others also. We are trying to organize a physical conference, so work is in progress, and hopefully sometime in this year, we would be holding a conference in India, which and thereby we'll be able to see physically each of us. But this webinar also has been an important and a useful means to be in touch with each other. Today, we are going to have our presenter, who is Miss Ksenia Trofimova, who is a research fellow at the Institute of Ethnology and Anthropology of the Russian Academy of the Sciences. And as we know that Romas migrated from India many years back, some say millennium, some say more than a millennium, and some say from a particular part of India, but there are evidences that it is from various regions of India they have migrated. They went via various countries and reached Europe and also to Americas, Argentina, and various parts. And as I see that today's topic talks about the religion, we understand that the Roma communities have adopted the religion based on the places where they have been staying. Like in Balkans or in other parts, they could be Muslims, they could be Christian, they could be other religions based on the religions or other factors which have influenced them to adopt the religion of that place where they are staying. But we are very happy that there is an increased interest among the Romas as among the Indians to know more about each other, connect with India and know about their roots and about the traditions and other things. So to know more about our speaker today and a brief introduction on the topic, I request Jamir to give us some details about it. Jamir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I extend my sincere thanks to everyone for attending the 21 virtual lecture of the lecture series on the subject of tradition in the making, lived Islam among some Roma communities in the Balkans. It's a very interesting, and I'm sure that it will be very enlightening as well. It's a very different perspective. Through this lecture, we may change our lens to look at Roma community, especially particularly in Balkan and across the world in general. So today we have a speaker, Ksenia Trofimova, and Ms. Trofimova, she is a research fellow at the Institute of Ethnology and Anthropology of the Russian Academy of Science, that is based in Moscow and the Russian Federation. At present, she has undertaken the research project focusing on vernacular religion. That is also a very interesting part, I think, and specifically on everyday religious culture of Roma Muslim communities in the Balkans. Her research work covers the ongoing study of local Sufi traditions and mixed worship and shared sacred sites in some countries like Serbia, Macedonia, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. Uh, and sorry, I have to. Ms. Trofimova co-authored the books. The title of the book is A Revival of Islam in the Balkans, From Identity to Religiosity, that was published by Macmillan in 2015. And another book, The Culture and Politics of Remembrance, Southeast European and Balkan Perspectives, and that was published in 2021. So she has been writing extensively, and her works have been extensively published locally and worldwide. The topic of today's lecture is, as I mentioned, that intimates the impact, what I perceive and infer, that the impact of religion of Roma in their traditions and values, particularly in Balkan countries. As we know that the first mass ingress of Proto-Roma in Balkans is connected to the emergence and establishment of the Ottoman Empire in the region during the 14th and 15th century. It is also historically established that the Roma had settled in Balkans before the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople in 1453 by Fateh Mehmed II. So the very first mention mention of the Sigan, where Turkey and Anatolia, the Roma was called Sigan or Sigani, and the very first mention of Roma in the tax documentation of the Ottoman Empire uh, uh, dates from 1430 and is found in the register of Timars. Timars is something like in Turkish language. The Timars is the land granted by the sultans of Ottoman Empire, especially for maintaining the military services. So, and it is a fact that Roma at that time, regardless of whether they were Muslim or Christians or whatever, the denomination they professed, were legally bound to pay the poll taxes. But some tax benefits were given to Roma Muslims in the Balkan regions, especially by the Ottoman Empire. Roma also converted to Orthodoxy, evangelical, Jehovah Witness in Balkan region. Jehovah and evangelical and Pentecostal, that's the very growing cult and growing denominations in Balkan, and the Roma are inclined to profess these denominations in Balkan regions. As myself observed and saw in Macedonia, there are some groups of Roma communities. They are professing Pentecostal and witness, Jehovah Witness. And but however, very interesting with the Roma community is the Roma mix their ethnicity with the professed religion, whether Islam or Christianity. And despite this, the Roma communities are univocally defined and addressed as a gypsies by their surrounding populations. Whether they're Muslim, they are Muslims or Christians or Pentecostal or evangelical or Orthodox or Orthodox Church or like the Jehovah Witness, but they are called and addressed by the surrounding populations as gypsies. That is also an interesting part to look upon, and I think your lecture will clarify and delineate these nuances and these the intricacies, especially in terms of religious profession of Roma community. And some groups of Roma are pagans. Still, they are pagans and worshippers of sun. And it is also riveting to signify, it's my own personal research study, which what I understood through my empirical observation and analysis, especially my visit to the Balkan Peninsula, Balkan countries like Albania, North Macedonia, or Serbia. What I find that the hereditary disposition of various groups of Roma communities towards India's dharmic religion, when the venerating different deities, exalting the Hindu philosophy for their quest for spiritual and temporal realms, despite they profess to Christianity or Islam or other religious orders. But they are so much inclined towards the dharmic religion of India, and they respect and hold in high esteem the Indian deities like the Durga, goddess Durga, and goddess Kali. So they have such kind of disposition, whatever the religions and religious orders they follow, or whatever the practices they do, especially in ancient, in medieval time also, the Muslims, they were Saracens. Saracens means they profess to the different religious practices, very much similar and identical to Indian religion. So that I also expect that the Trofimova will explain and draw upon this particular aspect of the religion of Roma in her speech. And another interesting aspect of Roma is they hold on to Indian cultural values. As in India also, we Indians, they respect faith, others' faith and creed, and espouse the religious diversity and freedom. Likewise, the Roma also respect others' faith in the creed and countenance the religious diversity and freedom. It is also noteworthy that the Roma had acquired a higher level of humanity and mutual respect between believers of various creeds and faith. Roma preserved the Indian approach, consisting in sharing some creeds, some rituals, some hopes with others, and they still behave more or less in the same way as they used to conduct themselves in India 1,000 years back, as we behave and carry out ourselves in India. So I don't want to go on, because we have a very expert and anthropologist and ethnologist, Trofimova, that we are excited to listen to her, because it is very interesting and very illuminating it is going to be. And thank you very much, sir. And I request our chairperson, Rajesh Sachdeva, sir, to proceed this lecture officially, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamil. Now I would request Mr. Shyam Parande, who is the Secretary General of the Antarashtriya Sahyog Parishad. This organization has been in connect with the Roma brothers and sisters for many decades, and I request him to give his welcome address. Mr. Shyamji, the floor is yours.
I am excusing myself. My best wishes for the talk, and I welcome you all to join the talk. I am in another meeting. I regret being, but I am connected. I'm listening halfway. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shyamji. On his behalf and on the behalf of the center, I welcome you all. And without further ado, I request our speaker to take the floor and give us some information and start her presentation on very interesting and which is likely to be a very informative topic. Ms. Ksenia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yes, great. So first of all, let me thank you for organizing such a beautiful and inspiring event, and for bringing us together here. I'm very happy to be here today, and I'm very happy to present some aspects of my research today. So first of all, I should, I think, share my presentation. Yes. Great. Great. So I will start with a few words about my research. So my research addresses religious landscape in the Balkans and its current transformations, as well as cultural and religious continuity and the ways in which religious traditions are transmitted. And I focus on what might be called lived religion. And this implies paying attention to individual interpretations and personal experience, and to observe how religious subjectivities are constructed and articulated here and now. My studies deal primarily with Muslim communities, and with a special focus on Roma Muslims, since they are crucial actors in shaping religious field and reproducing Islamic traditions in post-Yugoslavian states and societies. So we know from archival documents, from population censuses, from oral history and oral accounts, that since the establishing of the Ottoman Empire, many Roma living in the Balkan region have declared themselves or have been treated as Muslims. And we also can imagine that Islam has become an important part of their cultural background. But can we speak about, can we consider Islam as a homogeneous phenomenon? And do Roma Muslims practice their faith in the same way, even living side by side in the same neighborhood? Apparently they do not. And Islam may be approached as tradition in the making, to emphasize its processual nature and efforts of many social actors at the grassroots. Here I mean both top-down and bottom-up initiatives. Therefore, I use the conceptual frame of lived Islam to explore how vernacular religious practices and intra-confessional multivocality take shape at the grassroots. I wonder, how do competing Islamic discourses of correctness coexist with one another, and what forms the religious practices take? My research addresses two major cases. First of all, Sufi traditions, the twists and turns of spiritual continuity, religious knowledge formation, and religious knowledge transmission. And the second case involves pilgrimages and holy places, including the so-called shared spaces venerated by followers of different religious traditions. In this case, I trace the ways such spaces are sacralized and the veneration of sacred sites is organized. In my presentation, I will slightly touch upon the processes that shape the religious daily life of Roma Muslims in North Macedonia, Serbia, and Kosovo, the border region where my research takes place. So I will focus, first of all, on urban Muslim communities operating in Skopje, North Macedonia, Niš and Leskovac, and Belgrade in Serbia, and Prizren in Kosovo. I will also use spatial approach, since Roma mono-ethnic urban neighborhoods called mahallas act as spaces where thick social fabric is woven. I will start my route in the old town of Skopje, with its trade and craft quarter and historic buildings. The narrow streets link together the Ottoman Friday mosques, and the sounds of the Azan echoes throughout the valley. Almost the entire city flock here every day to stroll through, talk business, and have a coffee, stop by the stores and craft shops. And in the warm and dry weather, on Friday prayers, the streets are crowded with worshippers. The activities taking place in the central mosques and the madrasas are regulated by the Islamic religious community of North Macedonia that promotes Hanafi Mazhab in their religious practice. Here, almost nothing stays a secret. A little further, within a central part of the city, extends the district of Topana, an old urban unit historically compactly inhabited by various groups of Roma people. According to the statistics combined from demographic sources, most of Roma citizens in North Macedonia are recorded as Muslims. But at the same time, religious identity and representation is quite challenging to quantify correctly. Why? Due to its multi-layered structure and contextual reliance. Nevertheless, my interlocutors refer to Islam as at least a cultural background that influences, to some extent, their worldview and social practices. It is very important to note that religious identity is not strictly related to affiliation with a particular Roma group. So, for instance, those groups that are generally regarded by others as adherents of Islamic traditions might be entirely heterogeneous. For instance, Ashkali are known for transmitting Islamic traditions, but at the same time Ashkalians can be Muslims, Ashkalians can be Pentecostals, Ashkalians can be Catholic, Ashkalians can be Orthodox. And we always find people on their spiritual journey, and we often hear conversion narratives. Topana is a representative example of a Roma neighborhood. Its social infrastructure, patterns of neighborhood practices and communication, and religious landscape will be traced in other similar neighborhoods in various cities in the region. When it comes to urban studies, Topana as a neighborhood is described using such analytical categories as visibility, invisibility, institutional regulation or spontaneity, and improvisation on the grassroots, as well as isolation and integration. Despite being invisible in a certain sense, and to a certain extent, the Topana neighborhood, as well as other Roma mahallas in the region, become a site where religious everyday life unfolds in its various manifestations and forms. So, where the Topana neighborhood begins, where it meets another old historic shopping district, Dukanjik, near a busy intersection is the lodge of the Saadia Sufi Brotherhood, known locally as Vefa Babateke. There is a reason I start my journey in the Mahalla from this religious site. Sufism greatly contributed to the Islamization of the region of Rumelia, the Ottoman region of Rumelia. Sufi spiritual authorities and their fellowships were widely represented, both in the administrative centers and on the periphery, and they were deeply integrated into the fabric of local urban and rural societies. Skopje was one of the regional centers in the development of regional Sufi network. And Sufi lodges, as well as mausoleums of the revered spiritual masters, shaped the local sacred landscape. So Sufi fellowships influenced the religious life and spiritual experience of Muslims, including those from Roma communities. At the beginning of the 20th century, Skopje had several dozen Sufi sites. It is said that already then, some of them were served by dervishes from the Roma mahallas. So Vefa Baba was just one such tekem, one such Sufi lodge, which according to the shared narrative was founded by the sheikh of the Saadi Brotherhood, specifically for the poor, the craftsmen who lived in the Roma neighborhood. According to the legend, which is being formed now and which the current sheikh himself follows, the lodge was founded in the late 19th century by a traveling dervish. The fellows who attended the meetings in the late 19th century and paid their sadaqah, apart from the so-called Turks, included the Roma. Meanwhile, the religious landscape of the southeastern Europe has changed dramatically over the past 100 years. It has been adjusted by world and regional wars, the collapse of empires, and the formation of new political entities, as well as by revision of borders and the national and cultural policies of the newly formed states. As a result of such geopolitical transformations, Muslim communities found themselves in a situation when centralized ties and relationships were disrupted. This concerned those ties that traditionally mediated the activities of local religious and administrative bodies and branches, and those ties that provided spiritual continuity and therefore the processes of production and transmission of knowledge tradition. So the restrictions and bans on Sufi groups led to the situation when many Sufi centers were abandoned or moved their activities in a kind of a gray zone. Some groups continued their activities informally, as was the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Later, when the policy towards religious organizations has softened, they tried to rebuild spiritual ties by building relationships with other regional centers, as for example in Kosovo and North Macedonia. Other communities previously established in Kosovo and Macedonia operated on a semi-legal basis. In the same shadow sector in the second half of the 20th century, and especially in the last 40 years, new Sufi communities have emerged, and they have been forming spiritual connections almost from a clean slate. In certain regions, such as North Macedonia and Kosovo, where the ground has been quite fertile for this, the number of these new communities is becoming noticeable. Most of them at this point are represented among Roma, and their practice is localized in Roma urban neighborhoods. So how are Sufi institutional networks structured? So newly formed Sufi groups among Roma Muslims, they draw their line of spiritual succession from the recognized major Sufi centers in North Macedonia and Kosovo. At the same time, the new communities are predominantly mono-ethnic and consist entirely of Roma Muslims. Small groups may be formed using kinship ties, while larger communities usually gather around a charismatic spiritual authority. Thus, Roma Muslims become one of the key actors in the preservation and reproduction of Sufi practices. What is striking is the segregation of local Sufi communities according to ethnic position and belonging. This was once stressed by Alexander Popovich and Gerd Duisings, and can be in a way observed today. And this resulted in elaboration of alternative contexts in transmission of religious knowledge. At the same time, certain autonomy of Roma Sufi communities from the main regional centers and creation of their own spiritual centers do not imply mutual isolation and ignoring. According to oral accounts, the last Turkish sheikh of the Wifaba Baloj, Mehmet Ali, decided at the turn of the 50s to move to Turkey. He left the care of the lodge to those dervishes who remained in the city. As it is said, the sheikh died on his way to Istanbul, and his place in Skopje was taken by the now deceased grandfather of the current community leader. The grandfather belonged to the Roma subgroup called Kovaci, and he earned respect of other members of the brotherhood through his hard work. The family had their own workshop and a shop. Thus, the Sufi side, along with the tradition, were passed to the representatives of the Roma community. In actual practice, the status of spiritual master and his powers are normally passing through from father to his son. So a plaque at the entrance of the lodge lists the names of the three sheikhs, all come from the same Roma family. These sheikhs make up a Roma segment in the chain of spiritual succession of this third-year fellowship. Numerous Sufi sites started to set up in private houses of the Roma neighborhoods in the second half of the past century. My interlocutors use different names to refer to Sufi sites, such as Tekke, Semahane, Asitane, and sometimes a dergah. Although each of these names refer to a specific religious object, they are often used as synonyms. Wifa Baba is just one of such structures scattered through Roma neighborhoods that bring together followers of different Sufi brotherhoods. 2 streets up from the Saadi Lodge, one could mention a woman sweeping her courtyard and busily filling large plastic bottles with water. Here in the corner of the courtyard, in deep shadow, stands a tiny one-chambered structure painted green. The architectural form of this popular shrine distantly reminds of the turba, the mausoleum, the towers over some Muslim graves. As this woman told me with a certain solemnity, people gather here, pray here, light candles, and tap its water from its healing powers. 3 people are buried here, 2 men and a woman. But this place is called Choban Baba, and they, the people, come here and seek for water, for health, for happiness. I have observed dozens of such popular shrines during years of studying the sacred landscape of Roma neighborhoods in North Macedonia, Serbia, and in Kosovo. Such places are set here and now. They are commonly described as Muslim sites for Akhenaten and usually mark the sacred presence of God's people, I mean the saints, or as they are called, Babalara. The names of such saints of Babalara often remain unknown or unnamed to the outsiders. Unlike the mausoleums affiliated with Sufi lodges or mosques, such popular shrines can also be cenotaphs. They might be centered not around the burial of this anonymous saints, but around their permanent spiritual presence. Thursday is known as the day to visit the shrines, whether it is the mausoleum of a famous religious or public figure, or the site of the embodiment of the baraka or charisma and grace of the unknown saint. Sufi lodges and ritual halls primarily provide meeting and ritual space for consolidated groups of disciples of particular brotherhood that gather around a spiritual leader. Unlike Sufi tekkes, such popular private and family shrines attract visitors forming rather less structured emotional communities, but also moral communities of the neighborhood. And I would like to point out that such shrines and their caretakers usually do not form a single network. They tend to stay autonomously. In this sense, Sufi fellowships are more connected on the grounds than such private family and communal shrines. In some cases, the private shrines turn out to be devoted not to the saints or Babalara, but to the spirits masters of a place, the Saibir. The Saibir is an owner or master of the place. It's a personage which appears in narrations under various names, such as Kareskero Manush or Vatro Manush and other names. And the image of this more or less demonic figure often correlates in vernacular narrations with that of the anonymous sense, and as I believe is a part of the local genesis of their worship. As a rule, when explaining the reasons for founding this or that private and family and communal shrine in the neighborhood, the caretakers of these shrines transmit the same narrative, which is built upon a dream lore plot widely spread throughout the Islamic world. It is stressed that the saints, including these anonymous saints, initially choose their place, and they order a chosen person to take care of it. The saints initiate an agreement called zavet, which people through visionary encounters. So saints initiate an agreement and people agree to receive this agreement through visionary encounters. Thereby, this agreement establishes patronage relationships and takes control over all aspects of paying respect to the site. So the remarks given by my interlocutors, they highlight the role religious imaginaries are given in the complex process of cultural continuity. For instance, it is said that they, I mean the saints, are not revealed to everyone. They appear in your dream, and now you, so to say, do what is necessary. Religious sites act as a confessional landmarks, demonstrating their belonging to vernacular Islamic traditions and more broadly to Islam in general. How then is the sacral presence of the saints and their sanctity of place constructed and articulated? Popular shrines are usually arranged in the courtyards of private houses or at the crossroads. Sometimes they are set in a separate room in the house or in a corner of a room. The visual language used in assembling private shrines resembles and often copies, so replicates, the interiors of local Sufi lodges, including some multi-rayed patterns. For example, in the interiors of Sufi lodges, one can often find traces of the influence of Bektashi and Alevi traditions, such as images of Imam Ali, of Imam Hussein, and other calligraphies that reminds us of Shiite traces in Bektashi and Alevi traditions. The arrangement solutions in setting the context offered by these Sufi lodges, for instance, from selecting a color palette to the things that give meaning to the space, they develop conceptually from the idea of spiritual continuity and spiritual genealogies. And all the details are intended to affirm in terms of tradition the authenticity of these sacred places in the eyes of dervishes and outside visitors. At the same time, the principles by which the symbolic space of the shrine is created are not limited only to the replication of a kind of visual and material lingua franca. They also involve some improvisations which point to the personalization of the space of the shrine. Various details in the interior of the shrine, as well as narratives of the place, they can inform us about the cultural background and the nuances of religious subjectivity of the caretakers and visitors to a particular sacred site. For instance, in the image that I put in the center here, you can see, for instance, a photo of the deceased caretaker of the shrine. This woman, she founded this shrine in the Roma neighborhood. On the left, you can see the image of Imam Ali, and on the right, the image of the Virgin Mary. What does this mean? The image of the Virgin Mary reminds us of a very popular practice of visiting Catholic Marian shrines in the region. For instance, the Church of the Assumption of Virgin Mary in Kosovo, located in the village called Letnica in Kosovo, and replicated in some branches of this church. For instance, in the church, in the St. Joseph Church, located in the center of Skopje. The pilgrimage, so venerating and worshipping of Marian shrines is quite a popular practice among Roma Muslims, and putting such images in the shrine in the interior of a sacred space alone along with the image of the founder of the space and of the, for instance, of Imam Ali that refers to the Islamic tradition, all this assemblage, I would say, makes this place a place of memory, makes this space a space of religious identity, identification, yes, and forming of one's religious subjectivity. On the photograph on the right, you can see a very small, a tiny image of Marshal Tito. Tito's portrait. It is put in the sacred corner of this shrine in the mihrab, and along with the image of, I think it is Imam Ali with the lion, yes, Imam Ali and other Islamic calligraphy that points to the and refers to the Islamic tradition and to the way Islam is transmitted in this very Sufi lodge. Although, I'm very sorry. Although the caretakers delegate agency to the saints or to the site itself, they themselves are crucial agents in the making of tradition of worshipping saints and their shrines. They emphasize the role the personal spiritual experience plays in establishing oneself as a Muslim. And they revise the scenarios for visiting and venerating the site. They pass on stories of miracles and communication with the divine. They shape the historical narrative and the narrative of identity. Just a moment, I need to put it aside. Put it aside. Okay, we'll make it. Okay. So the special proximity of the Sufi sites and popular shrines may be seen as a common pattern in this border region. At the same time, the religious landscape of the Roma neighborhood is not limited to the sites which are associated or influenced by Sufi traditions. It might be also formed by mosques, prayer rooms, and religious sites of Christian churches, such as Adventist churches, Pentecostal churches, and other Christian denominations. For example, in Shuta Orisari neighborhood, there are at least 2 Sunni Friday mosques, the madrasa, which is affiliated with the Saadi Lodge from the Twana neighborhood, and a single Shiite Husayniya. The imam of the largest mosque in Shuta Orisari, the Amdi Pasha Mosque, is a graduate in Islamic theology, as are some other spiritual leaders in Roma neighborhoods. It is worth noting that Shuta Orisari is a Roma-run municipality in Skopje, which has an actively developing infrastructure and capacities for locating major religious sites. At the same time, the emergence of Muslim communities of various kinds takes on a mass character among Roma Muslims during the last 50 or 60 years. This combined with the expansion of the religious marketplace leads to an increased discussion of authenticity and normativity. And this becomes part of everyday conversations in the communities. This also led to the situation when the established social moral guidelines for the building and portrayal of the image of the faithful, true Muslim are beginning to be challenged and questioned. And what is really important here is that being neighbors doesn't mean accepting each other. On the contrary, it means in practice, focusing on differences, working with differences, and articulating differences. The interconfessional discourse developed among Roma Muslims in the region is formed by multivocality and multiplicity of ideas, interpretations, and practices. In this context, religious leaders and common believers are often appealing to the neighborhood as a social cultural space. They judge it as unfit to be considered of a space of Islam, and they deny Roma neighborhoods, mahallas, and its inhabitants the right to be called Muslims. So every single aspect of the practice of faith can become the basis for mutual criticism and mutual stigmatization, as well as mutual acceptance and mutual support. So what actually triggers the various Muslim actors in these neighborhoods the most? First of all, this is a tendency toward there is a tendency toward autonomy and uncertainty about the foundations of religious teachings. Many of my interlocutors call their brothers in faith to finally define what Muslim madhab do they follow? What are the foundations and what is the basis of their creed? And they criticize and they accuse each other of going beyond the normative frames of Islamic tradition, of Islamic faith. And what is important, and I'd like to point this out, that we cannot consider even a single Sufi group as a homogeneous unit, because even in a single Sufi group, we can we can trace mutual criticism, we can trace mutual mistrust, we can trace and we can see some disciples criticizing their sheikhs, and their sheikhs criticizing their disciples, right? Another trigger is the choice of sources for religious self-education. In our globalized world, Muslims and Roma Muslims as well, they can use numerous sources for their religious self-education, especially Roma Muslims, since Roma Muslims can use different languages to approach Islamic theology. They can use Turkish language. They do speak, and they do read in Turkish. They do read in Bosnian. They do read in Albanian, and they do listen to various charismatic Muslim authorities throughout the world. We know that a lot of Muslim religious leaders they talk to a very wide audience. Yes, and they gather around themselves quite a wide audience from all over the world, and their speeches are translated in different languages. So Roma Muslims, as other Muslims, they are interested in following such charismatic leaders from all over the world, from the Middle East universities and Middle East spiritual centers, from Turkish spiritual centers, and from the diaspora in Western European countries. What can act as an object for religious critique? Religious practices, especially veneration of sacred sites, and some minor techniques of the Sufi prayers, such as dhikr. They can act as object, and they can be object for intensive critique among Roma Muslims. And another important trigger is financial component and the development of a great economic niche, especially when it comes to healing practices, and especially when it comes to working with some species such as genes and exorcism in the community. And yes, and as far as I could, as far as I could observe, so these triggers, they are quite common, and people try to work with these triggers, and people are very open to discuss everything, that every aspect of their faith and every aspect of their practice of faith. So I will stop here, and I will save some time for questions and discussion on some of my notes I try to present today. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ksenia. Now we open the floor for questions, comments, and I see there is already one hand up. And now I think it is Mr. Virgil Bitto. So you have the floor is yours for your comments or a question.
Yeah, just thank you. Just a comment. Very beautiful piece of work, Ksenia. Congratulations. And it's very in depth. But what I can see here, what you made us understand the role of the Roma population in the development and preservation of local cultures, in particular the area you research. And also what I can notice, the capacity of Roma communities to adapt to any social situation, any social, economic or political situation. So, and also I want to ask you where we can find your publication, where it's your work published. Thank you.
So much. Thank you so much. I agree that Roma people more or less, maybe more than less, actually integrated when it comes to the Balkan society in the major traditions and major cultures. Yes, and they are bearers of major traditions and major cultures, and they themselves establish a kind of field where they can reproduce such traditions, such traditions, and so on. And concerning my publications, I have I published my works in, for instance, in nationality papers, and it's a quite famous journal. I have several chapters in collective volumes, and in some other journals as well. And I have an account on the Academia Edu, where you can find all of my works, and you can download it for free and read it. And I would be very happy to share my research with you.
Thank you. Could anybody else who doesn't speak to close the mics? And also, Ksenia, can you write in the chat any link?
Yes, yes, sure. Sure.
Mr. Grattan, you have some comment or question. The floor is yours.
Thank you. That was a really interesting talk, and I learned a lot from it. And I just wanted to mention in a couple of sentences my own experience, because I was part of the Shudorozari community for a few years. And I remember so well that on St. George's Day, for example, we would all be out there going to the local church, in fact, to kiss the icon. but at the same time, of course, keeping Sunneti and other Muslim tradition going at the same time. So it's kind of a Christian Muslim, but more Muslim. But of course, there's been a huge revival since then in Stuttgart with the building of the mosques and so on. So really things have moved on. But in my time, you could see that participation of Muslim and Christian, but you might also step into the home of Shaikh Yusuf and think you are entering an Indian home, because he was so gone on after being in India. He was so gone on the idea. And all of us also from that time have really kept, let's say, a place in our hearts for Kali Sara, for Sara, the goddess Kali. So that's all going together. And I learned more now from you about the Sufi shrines and so on, in which I did visit one shrine while I was there. So that's my bit to say. We are very much on a path, because of course in the Yugoslav socialist years there was a decline in the Muslim attendance, but the heritage has always strongly been there, and it's come back strongly today. So that's my bit to say. Thank you very much, though, for your talk.
I do apologize. Mohan Singh, please switch off your mic because we cannot hear properly.
May I speak, sir, if you allow?
Yeah, Jamil, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Ksenia, thank you very much for your illuminating and very knowledgeable presentation. And you touched upon the different aspects and facets of Roma denominations, creeds and faith, and sacred sites. One thing I wanted to listen to you in the context of a spirituality, because the Roma is so much spiritual, and the means the paragon of spirituality. Because I myself visited Shutkar, Izeri, Siglana, Toplana in Gostivar in North Macedonia. There is a Dravka, she is from Palanka, Samedraveska Palanka. I also visited there. So I find that Roma Muslim, that particular, the buzzword, the Roma Muslim and Muslims, a lot of differences, what I personally observed, because here in India or in Middle East countries or the Central Asian countries, the Sufi has a different, the different facets and a different practices and a different disposition. But the Sufism amongst the Roma community, they have the different connotations, they have the different practices, are quite different from Middle East Muslim countries or the Central Asian countries. I find the Roma people, Herdeleze, they celebrate Herdeleze with the Christians, brothers and sisters, and they become the very intimate part of that processions and celebration. Likewise, but the traditions making, the practices which are very much Indians. How Herdeleze, they go to the mountain, bring the water, Sutla Pani, that they call it, the holy water. So they go to the mountain, they bring. So it is quite similar and analogous to the practices by Indians in India. So in each and every religious practices, whether it is exterior practices or extrinsic or intrinsic practices, you find, whether in abstract or whether it is in concrete, you find the reflection of Indianness and the Indian practices, especially with regards to religious practices and cultural practices. So I want to know that because the Roma are the highly spiritual people, they have a respect for the religious diversity. They celebrate, the Islamic festivals like Muharram and Ramadan, and like other festivals, and even with the Christians like the Easters and all, and even with the Jews. So they are very much open and flexible. And they they share, they don't have rigidity and obstinacy, rigidity and they are not obdurate in practicing their religion. So what you find, what is your the findings, your research findings, that in Sufism in Roma, because as you I saw that you have also co-authored a book. Sufism, I visited Dargah, in besides the Toplana in nearby Shutkorizere in Macedonia, North Macedonia. There I talked to the Dargah head of the Dargah, and he was talking about the like the Roma Muslims practices, how they visit the Dargah. And as some Roma Muslims don't like, going to Dargah or the spiritual, the Sufi practices. They don't like. They say they are something bit like Zambari in Serbia, Bulgaria, and Macedonia. So they are Muslims. They follow the Muslim Islam religion. They are a bit strict, so they claim that they don't like going to Dargah or the Sufi people or the Sufi people, because they think that they have disgraced from the main fundamental principle of Islam. And so what is your observation, Trofimova? What do you think that, and how? Because I find the Roma Muslim is quite different from the Muslim from the Southeast Asian countries and Middle East Asian countries or Central Asian countries or some part of other part of world.
Thank you so much. What I've observed during the years of my research is that the Roma Muslim community is not a heterogeneous unit. So we can trace multiplicity on the ground. So there are different social actors among Roma Muslims, and they see Islam in their own way. And they try to practice their faith in their own way. So we can find, for instance, those who consider Islam just a cultural background. For instance, my second name is Islamic and my first name is Islamic, like I'm Mohammed Niazi, for instance. And okay, I'm somehow connected, associated with Islamic faith and with Islamic traditions, but I'm not Muslim in my practice. I'm just a person. I don't know. I believe in something, like I believe in the communication with the divine. I believe in the dream war. I believe that someone or something regulates our life here and now. I'm not Muslim in my daily practice. I drink alcohol. I visit Christian churches when I need something, when I have some problems, and I ask for help from such, they call it good places, yes, places embodied with grace. There's one aspect and one segment. There are Muslims that are very conservative, who are very conservative, who follow who follow discourses shared by some Middle Eastern religious leaders. They're much more conservative, and they criticize almost everyone around them for not obeying the rules, for not following the rules, for not knowing the theological basis of Islam, for not reading Quran, for not studying Arabic, for not waking up early for the morning prayer. There are less conservative Muslims who can accept Sufi traditions, but only in a way they consider legal and authentic and normative. Yes, we deal with different discourses of correctness. We deal with different discourses of authentic practice of faith. We remember Talal Asad talking regarding considering Islam as a discursive tradition. Yeah. So they actually follow Talal Asad in his argument that Islam is a discursive tradition, and that we all construct different discourses and try to implement those discourses in our daily practice. What is important that when we take Sufi sector, Sufi field, different Sufi communities, even if they are operating in the same neighborhood, they might criticize each other for every single aspect of their practice. How they pray. Do they follow, for instance, do they mark Nowruz celebrations on the 22nd of March? Do they involve Hederezi, Jordan in their, annual festivals? Do they use, for instance, those sheaf, when they make piercing during the Dikar ritual? Do they use such techniques? Do they use quite, I would say, intensive? Do they perform their prayers intensively, emotionally, or not? Every single aspect turns out to be an object of mutual criticism. And that's true, yes. That's why I'm talking about multivocality on the ground. And even if the caretakers of the private family shrines are in question, they also do criticize each other for not taking care of the shrine properly. That is the normativity on the ground, to criticize each other and to construct these traditions step by step, by accepting or working with differences, by challenging differences, by articulating differences. That's why that's why when, for instance, I talk to someone from the city, be it an Albanian from the church, be it an imam from the Albanian or Bosnian or Turkish mosque, they consider Roma Muslims as a quite unite and homogeneous entity, but they are not. And this is very important. And what is important is that Roma Muslims, Roma communities, Sufi communities, Sunni Jamaats, and those caretakers of the shrines, they are not isolated. They are open to discuss their faith. They are open to build connections beyond the region, for instance, in Turkey and in the diaspora in Western European countries. For instance, they the Shia traditions and Shiites, Husseinis, this Shiite prayer room. It was founded like 2 years ago in Shuto Orizari, and it was founded by a young man who came back from Sweden. He spent many years in Sweden. He was introduced into the Shia community, into the Shia milieu, and they explained to him that what you see as Islam, what you consider to be Islam, is actually Shia tradition, Shia Islam. And he went back to Shuto Orizari. He came back and he opened his Husseinia. Now he's confident in himself. He says, before, when I was a small boy, I observed those Sufi rituals, and I observed my dad visiting Sufi meetings, ritual meetings, and I was wondering who we are. And now he's confident. Now he knows that he's Shia. Why? Because Shias from Sweden explained everything to him. Now he's Shia, and now there is one Husseinia in the neighborhood. And the Sufi lodges that actually are located around this Hosseiniya, they try to explain, and those Sufi sheikhs, they try to explain this young guy that he's not Shia, he's Sufi. Because actually, they consider all those details, they consider all those practices not as Shia, but as Sufi. So it's all about discourses. It's all about multiplicality.
Mm. So any more questions or comments from anyone else, please? Yeah, Mr. Puya, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to say thank you to you, Mr. Rajesh and Mr. Zamir, for providing such a beautiful program as always. It's very wonderful to get people like Miss Trofimova from Russia. Как дела? Хорошо. Russia is a good friend of mine. I'm originally from Iran. I'm Roma from Iran. We love Russia, good people. And just want to say that it's completely different to the Middle Eastern Roma. The Middle Eastern Roma from Egypt, from Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and when they are Muslim, they follow the religion. You know, they have some cultural practices as well, but not in the stage as Miss Terofimova was explaining in detail. It's very different. And but at the same time, we are understanding that our ancestral roots come from India. My ancestral roots, all our ancestral roots come from India, and I'm sure it's the same with the Roma from the Balkans. You know, the same with the Roma from Central Europe or Western Europe, and all that. This is what make us one. Religion is different, but culturally we are one. This is what's very important. When you go talk to Roma, before they say their religion, they say we are Roma. So the culture comes like a very special thing. I know religion has a big part personally, but the culture, they are one. Domari people, Romani people, we are one people. We have the same flag. We carry the same flag. So one thing I'm going to tell you that it's interesting you mentioned about Husseiniya, and I come from Iran. We are only Shia, you know, Muslim. And Imam Ali and Imam Hussein are the Shia Imams, you know, the first and the third one. So it's interesting. It's very interesting. And Sufism has its foundation coming from Persia. You know, the Hazrat Jalaluddin Maulana started it before the Shams Tabrizi, which most of the poetries were written for him. And just want to say that the big problem is, I think, with the Balkan countries. I don't know if you visit Bulgaria. There was much Islamophobic attacks towards Muslims a few years ago, and some mosques were discriminated. There were vandalism involved. You know, you have their own neo-Nazi groups, you know, and John Balsky, which, you know, you're aware of this man. He should be even kicked out from the European Union by saluting the Nazi salute. I don't understand how does it work. This is another story we should perhaps cover with EU and its, you know, double standards, I would call, you know. So Bulgaria has a history of supporting neo-Nazis. You know, Germans were the first people who were invited in Bulgaria, you know. Unlike Yugoslavia, where many Roma were fought against the Nazis in Yugoslavia with Tito, with the partisan movement. I am a big supporter of partisan movement, and I have personal friends who were part of the partisan movement who lost their relatives. Just want to say one thing to you. How did you find, I mean, as Macedonia, I would say Macedonia is a very accepting country to Roma. And I have many Macedonian Roma friends, and they say we are Roma from Macedonia. Can I ask you the question, have you visited the country of Serbia? You know, we have in Sydney, Australia, where I'm residing right now. There are some Serbian Roma, but they refer to themselves as Serbian. This is a conversation I have with my friend who is a lawyer named Orhan Tahir. He's from Bulgaria. And it's disappointing because is it the same the countries you visit, they feel kind of, I don't understand. You're Roma. We will not be treated as a citizen of a European country such as Serbia. We are always Roma. So can I just ask you, is it the same with Albania? Is it the same with Macedonia? I know that Macedonian Roma are very patriotic to their Roma background. I have Macedonian Roma friends. And the other question I want to ask you that, how did you feel? Obviously, we are known for our hospitality. Roma people are very, 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 and this goes back to Indian culture. In Indian culture, a guest is a gift from God. It's the same with Roma culture. When we have a guest, we bring the cleanest table, we bring cleanest plate and cutleries and everything. We shower our guests with all the good things. How did you find when you were spending time with the locals? Mike's free.
Thank you so much for your comment and your questions. What you mentioned concerning Serbia and Roma, and they call themselves Serbs, I think this is connected with the so-called negative identity. When people are stigmatized for years, and when they know that they actually much more, it's better to call, it's better to integrate and assimilate with the major society, they do this. Because actually, you can't live you can't stay stigmatized for years and years and years. And in some situations, you just want to survive. And sometimes, yes, Roma declare themselves as Serbs, as Albanians, as Turks, and other major peoples, yes, in this or that country. Macedonia is a special case because Macedonia is quite open to develop intercommunal relationships on the ground. But even in Macedonia, you can trace stigmatization towards Roma. You can trace a kind of social distance towards Roma people. And but what is important that also in Macedonia and as well as in Serbia, for instance, there are a lot of initiatives from the ground, and these initiatives are run by Roma, and these initiatives are intended to change the whole situation, to fight for the rights, to open new ways to educate children, to develop infrastructures, social infrastructures in the Roma neighborhoods, and so on and so forth. Yes, so it depends from place to place. Actually, when we talk about North Macedonia, we usually look at Skopje. We don't go into the to the village, and the situation in the village can differ, much differ from that of the capital. Same in Serbia, and I know I've visited several civic organizations and civic initiatives in Belgrade, and there is a female organization that helps Roma women to integrate into the society, to graduate from schools, to find jobs, to make the atmosphere at home more comfortable, let's say. And so it depends on the situation, on the context. And when hospitality is in question, I don't know. My personal experience is also a specific one because I've been raised in connection with the Roma community. So I've been raised. I've lived. I've been living for many. Okay, now there is no settlement here, and so I've been living with close, so nearby, close to the Roma settlement in Moscow. So I had a different experience. So from my childhood.
Forgive me for interrupting. Are you Roma yourself? Do you have partially Romani in you?
I have roots. So I've never seen Roma as some kind of isolated, exotic, community. So we normally exchanged our daily experience, and that's why it was not difficult for me to enter the field, but here people in Russia, especially in Moscow, people are more closed, they are not that empathetic, or they don't want to open themselves to others. In contrast to Moscow, Balkan cities, even cities, yes, and Balkan urban communities are very open and are very warm and so yes, I was surprised by the hospitality and by the openness, by the wish to continue our friendship. So I have a lot of friends from my so to say field of from my field.
Now we have the last comment or question by Mr. Virgil Bittu.
Thank you very much, sir. So now in response to Mr. Puya, religion and the faith practices are part of culture, as the language, clothes, and so on and so on. And as Ksenia mentioned before, the Roma communities are not heterogeneous communities. And that's why we adapted, because of the discrimination, abuses, ignorance, we adapted to the local cultures, local element cultures. And we developed them in different ways. So for example, two communities which are 10 kilometers away from a community, they speak different dialects. Ksenia mentioned about two Muslim groups operating in the same area. They have different practices, different cultural elements. Yeah. So each one of us, each Roma community, each Roma group developed the culture due to the geographic, socio-economic, and political circumstances. And also I wanted to mention about Macedonia. In Macedonia, there are big, large, compact Roma communities. For example, in Shuto Rizari, I think there are about 90% Roma. So yeah, this is the democratic participation effect. Being many, they can take the decisions locally. So that's why the situation, and it's for me, it's like an example for the entire world, what is happening in politically, what is happening in Macedonia, because of the numbers, and they never had this stigma of not identifying themselves as Roma, as the immigrants you told me in Sydney. So we have, I'm from Romania, I'm living now in London, so we have Roma immigrants who are not identifying themselves as Roma. They say that they are Romanian. It's because the stigma which have been built since years, since decades. So I think we'll take more decades from now on to start to rebuild the pride of self-identifying as Roma. But we have to work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I see, before closing, I see one more hand up. So this will be the last. So Mohan Singh, the floor is yours.
Good evening, sir. I want to tell you that I have been living among the Romas for 1 year.
I was in UN mission in Kosovo. So I was a station commander of a police station. And in that town, there were so many Roma. Our language assistant, my language assistant was a Roma. Her sister was also a Kosovo police service policeman. And we all Indians, there was we were 14 from Delhi police and at least total 200 from India. So we used to visit all the towns where population of Romas were there. Gilan was the town where most of the Romas were living, and we used to hire the accommodation of the Roma only. And at the time we had a very nice bonding with them. Or at the time we got chance to visit all the places around like Macedonia. We used to go often to Macedonia and meet the. They used to call us whenever they used to see us. They say Indi. And sometimes they speak some word which we speak here, and that was a nice experience. Still, I am in touch with many of them. That I want to share that experience only.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohan Singh. I think now we have come to the end of our lecture session. And I would like to really thank our speaker, Ms. Ksenia Trofimova, for an excellent presentation, which was very educative and informative. I had also stayed for almost 2.5 years in Bulgaria and Macedonia. But what she has told me, I was not aware of that. So it was in news to me about the Sufi way of living among the Roma Muslims in Skopje and other parts of North Macedonia. So it was very useful, and I'm sure many, as any others have also commented, it was news to them also about the way of living or way of practices being done by Roma Muslims in Balkans, especially the 3 countries you covered. And so I also like to thank all the participants and for their participation, and also to some who have given their comments and shared their experiences, which is very useful to all of us because this way we come to know more about Roma's way of life in various parts, and especially for religion. This is the first lecture where we had specifically talked about the religious elements in the Roma culture and Roma way of life. So we would be very keen to know more about such practices by the other academicians and scholars. So thank you very much, Ms. Ksenia Trofimova and all others. And we would welcome your participation in our future lectures. As I mentioned, we hold it every month at the in the last week of the month, covering certain interesting or useful aspects of Roma life in various parts of the world. And we also circulate a fortnightly newsletter covering some important news which we pick up from various sources about Roma's achievements, Roma's issues, Roma's initiatives by various agencies to improve the life of Romas in different parts of the world. With these words, I'd like to thank you all. Bye-bye and namaste.
Mr. Dhanyavad.
Dhanyavad. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
So we'll close the meeting now.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.